ready to vote. Lawmakers take the next step in the confirmation process for President Biden's nominee to the Supreme Court. We're on Capitol Hill. The church in Germany. A cardinal says it is time to change Catholic teaching on sexuality. Analysis of how the faithful are responding. Persecuting the faithful. A closer look at violence aimed at Christians in Nigeria. And a new look at Notre Dame. How one group is bringing the beloved landmark to a virtual reality. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, April 7th, 2022. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. History is made as Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson becomes the 116th Supreme Court Justice and the first Black woman to sit on the High Court. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales joins us now with the latest. Eric?
Well, Tracy, it was a big day in the Senate. By a vote of 53 to 47, she was confirmed. And as expected, 3 Republicans, Senator Mitt Romney, Lisa Murkowski, and Susan Collins, all voted yes.
The yeas are 53, the nays are 47, and this nomination is confirmed.
Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson is now a justice on the U.S. Supreme Court. Prior to the vote, fireworks took place among Republicans, some expressing concerns over her judicial philosophy and prior rulings.
I think we can anticipate that she will vote consistently to undermine the constitutional rights of Americans, to undermine our rights to free speech, to undermine our rights to religious liberty, to undermine our rights under the Second Amendment to keep and bear arms.
So we're always going to remind the public that the only reason Judge Jackson is the first African-American female to go on the court is they stopped a Republican nominee because of her ideology. To my Democratic friends, we're not going to forget that.
Minority Leader Mitch McConnell highlighted the Democrats' plan of court packing.
Judge Jackson was the court packer's favorite pick for the vacancy, and she refused to follow the Ginsburg-Breyer model. She signaled the opposite. She said she'd be thrilled to be one of however many.
Meanwhile, Majority Leader Chuck Schumer praised her as a living historic figure.
People sometimes talk about standing on the shoulder of giants. Well, Judge Jackson will go down in history as an American giant upon whose shoulders others will stand tall, and our democracy will be better off for it.
Judge Jackson will now take both the constitutional and judicial oaths when she joins her colleagues on the court. Now, she won't be part of any hearing come the spring or any ruling this spring. She will actually begin hearing and ruling on cases come the fall, which is set to begin in October. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, as the nation awaits the Supreme Court's ruling on legalized abortion, Michigan's governor has sued in state court to preempt a dormant pro-life law from taking effect. Gretchen Wimmer seeks a decision to strike down a 1931 statute which made elective abortion a felony. Michigan is among 8 states with older laws that would return to force if the U.S. High Court overturns the Roe v. Wade decision. The president of Right to Life of Michigan says the governor is ignoring the voices of Michiganders. Well, U.S. allies agreed to send more weapons to Ukraine, and the Biden administration just announced new restrictions against 3 Russian airlines that may bring some of their operations to a halt. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen.
Tracy, good evening to you. Tonight, it's being called an unprecedented action. The U.S. is cutting off its exports to those 3 Russian airlines that you mentioned. In short, they will not get parts from the U.S. to service their aircraft, making it very difficult to fly.
The U.S. Deputy Treasury Secretary makes clear the Russian war machine must be stopped.
By going after their aerospace industry, their marine industries, and other industries that are critical to fighting the war in Ukraine, because ultimately our goal is to stop the invasion in Ukraine, and we're going to use sanctions, export controls.
Destruction from the war in Ukraine continues to mount. In Borodyanka, emergency crews look for possible survivors under rubble left after Russian troops attacked. And 6 weeks in, no sign of Russia leaving anytime soon. In the White House press briefing room, Press Secretary Jen Psaki updated reporters.
We have committed to providing $1.7 billion of weapons of security assistance to Ukraine since the beginning of this conflict.
Overseas in Belgium, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with NATO foreign ministers. The group agreed to provide even more weapons to Ukraine to defend against Russia's invasion.
We don't see a Russian retreat. What we see is a Russian regrouping and repositioning of their forces.
NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg also called out China for refusing to condemn Russia's aggression and says Russia's war crimes will be investigated.
All those responsible for these atrocities must be brought to justice, and allies are supporting efforts for an international investigation.
Also, the United Nations General Assembly just voted to suspend Russia from the Human Rights Council due to its war crimes in Ukraine.
Meanwhile, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has tested positive for coronavirus. Now, the White House says President Biden, despite recent brief interactions with the Speaker, is not considered a close contact. He tested negative for the virus last night. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
And joining us now is Clare Lopez, founder and president of Lopez Liberty LLC. Clare, great to see you as always. As we just heard Owen mention, the United Nations suspended Russia from the UN Human Rights Council, and they did so due to reports of gross and systematic violations and abuses of human rights. I want to get your thoughts on that move. What do you think?
Well, even though the removal of Russia from the United Nations Human Rights Council may be thought of perhaps as symbolic, I think it matters. And this is, of course, in the wake of the reports we're seeing of horrific atrocities committed by Russian troops in places like Bucha, outside of the capital of Ukraine, Kiev.
Yeah, and another thing I want to touch on, Clare, is also those new sanctions against Russia. I want to get your thoughts on that, and what type of impact do you think it will have, if any?
Well, you know, even those sanctions may take a while to really have their full effect. I'm looking at a list of some of the new sanctions that are being imposed, and they include things like revoking Russia's most favored nation status, denying Russia borrowing privileges in international financial institutions, also taking aim directly at some of the Russian elites and their family members, including reportedly 2 daughters of the president, Vladimir Putin. So there are more, but the point is that even if these sanctions do take a while to really have an effect, they are having an effect, and the more personal they get against those elite leadership figures around Vladimir Putin, the more the pressure will build for a change of course on the assault in Ukraine.
Clare, but besides sanctions, you know, what else do you think President Biden and his administration should be doing right now?
Well, I mean, the one thing that has been sheltered, if you will, from sanctions by both the United States and many of our European allies is the energy sector. And this speaks to the great leverage that Russia has obtained over our European allies, including NATO allies, by being such a large provider of energy, oil and natural gas to those countries. And not wanting to cut them off with serious ramifications. But the other part of that is that the United States itself has gone back on our own ability to be energy independent, and more than that, to be able to provide and to sell excess energy, oil and natural gas to our European partners and allies, which would alleviate a great deal of not only domestic oil, gasoline prices, but help our allies in Europe as well. That remains to be done.
Clare, we have probably about a minute or so left. I want to get your take on this. Yesterday, President Biden said that the war in Ukraine could last a long time. What do you think about that? And is there a way forward without a protracted war?
Well, you know, I regret hearing that from our leadership here in the United States, because Many believe that were we to provide Ukraine with all of the weapons, the drones, the missiles, the Stingers, the Javelins, the shore-to-ship missiles like Harpoons, and those MiGs that they've requested that Poland was ready to give, that the Ukraine could be successful in pushing the Russian troops out of their sovereign territory much more quickly. So the question remains, why does it at least appear that the Biden administration is dragging its feet on providing enough of those weapons that Ukraine is asking for?
Yeah, well, Claire, unfortunately, we have to leave it right there. So much more we could talk about, though. As always, we really appreciate your analysis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, a preview of France's presidential election, which starts Sunday. Plus, a new way for people to see Notre Dame Cathedral. We'll explain. In the West African nation of Burkina Faso, an American nun has been kidnapped. According to the Kentucky-based community of the Maronites of Holy Cross, the gunman took 83-year-old Sister Sue Ellen Tennyson captive. Two other nuns were living in the same house. They are safe. The kidnappers have yet to contact the order. In Nigeria, 3 Catholic priests were recently kidnapped, continuing a disturbing trend of violence against Christians. The priests were kidnapped in separate incidents last month. There are also reports of churches being burned. One report says the violence in a Nigerian city has become so bad that Christians now live in the north and Muslims in the south. Joining us now from Rome is Father Ize, student from the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross. He is also the former director of communications at the Catholic Diocese of Nsukka, Nigeria. Father Matthew, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. If you don't mind, can you give us an update on the priests who were kidnapped and also the situation in general for Christians in Nigeria?
Thank you very much. Let me quickly say that today Nigeria is bleeding as a nation. There is a hemlock in the heart of Nigeria as a nation. Hemlock is a poisonous plant. Now, the hemlock in the heart of Nigeria as a nation is terrorism, which gave birth to the problem of insecurity. Now, the problem of insecurity in Nigeria since 2010 has escalated, and there have been so many invasions in Nigeria today, from the Boko Haram sect, from the bandit, and also from the herdsmen. Now, coming to Kaduna State, where we've been having so many attacks in the past few days and past few weeks. On the 6th of February this year, Reverend Father Joseph Danjuma was kidnapped in the parish house, and by the special grace of God, he was released within 24 hours. But then on the 80th of March this year, Reverend Father Joseph Akate was also kidnapped alongside 4 other persons. During this kidnap, the gateman in the parish house was shot dead. As we speak today, Reverend Father Joseph has not been set free. He is still with the kidnappers. It is also important to tell you that today there is a priest from that side, Kaduna Diocese, who was kidnapped 3 years ago, and up till today, his whereabouts is not yet known. Apart from the priest in Kaduna, there are other people who have been kidnapped. There are communities that have been attacked, and people have been mercilessly killed, butchered, massacred, and sliced like onions. And the worst aspect of this problem is that this problem continues to escalate on a daily basis.
Father, this is also heartbreaking. Are there fears that the violence will escalate as we approach Easter?
Yes, as we approach Easter, the celebration of Easter will still go on. The point is that the problem of terrorism in Nigeria is more in the northern part of Nigeria, the northeast, and then in the northwest. Generally, we have the problem of terrorism in Nigeria in all the parts of the country, but then it is more in the northern part of the country. The celebration of the Easter will always go on, but then people are advised to take adequate precaution during the Easter celebration. For example, people are advised to celebrate maybe early, And then those in the northern part of the country are advised to take more precaution during this period of Easter.
Just out of curiosity, I mean, are there any signs that this will come to an end, that there will be a truce or a stop in the fighting at all?
We continue to pray to see what will happen in future. In this regard, I think the Catholic bishops of Nigeria are doing a lot. They are doing great in this regard to see how to assist the people of God during this period of crisis. For example, they have continued to talk to the people to keep the spirit of faith and hope alive. For example, we have Most Reverend Dr. Godfrey Igwebikona, the Bishop of the Catholic Diocese of Nsukka, who has done a lot through his teachings to keep faith and hope alive in the nation. And also some other bishops across the country are also doing their best. Collectively, they have called Christians to continue to pray and to stand strong in this moment of crisis. We are all trusting in God and hoping that one day this problem will come to an end.
We are praying for everyone in Nigeria. And Father, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it, and thank you so much for what you do. Up next, a preview of France's presidential election, which starts Sunday. Plus, a new way for people to see Notre Dame Cathedral. We'll explain. Voters in France will head to the polls this Sunday to begin the country's presidential election. President Emmanuel Macron leads 11 other candidates ahead of Sunday's first round. His main challenger is Catholic Marine Le Pen. The margin between the two has narrowed since the 2017 election, which Macron won by a wide margin. The runoff is scheduled for April 24th. The president of Yemen has resigned.
لاستكمال تنفيذ مهام المرحلة الانتقالية.
President Hadi spoke on national television. He is transferring power to a new governing body comprised of a president and 7 other members. They will seek a permanent ceasefire in the civil war, which began back in 2014. Hostilities have pitted Iranian-backed Houthis against the Saudi-backed government, claiming some 150,000 lives. In Germany, ongoing conversations about homosexuality and the church. German Cardinal Reinhard Marx has been outspoken about changing the church's teaching. Recently, the cardinal claimed that the Catechism is not set in stone and that the church should be more inclusive. And joining me now is A.C. Wimmer, editor-in-chief of CNA Deutsch. A.C., welcome back. Always so good to see you. Let's talk a little bit more about the comments from Cardinal Marx and the German church's growing interest in changing the catechism, specifically when it comes to sexuality. What can you tell us?
There was a lovely spread, 7 pages of it, in one of the most popular magazines in Germany, the Star magazine, Tracy. And Cardinal Marx was photographed amply and was also able to talk about a number of contentious issues, in particular one that he's been bringing to the prominence publicly a lot lately, celebrating a queer mass in Germany just recently, and that is homosexuality. He pronounced that, according to him, homosexuality was in fact not a sin, that for him theology was about a primacy of love, and that he thought the catechism needed changing, needed adapting to what was an adapting understanding of the teachings of the church on his view.
And A.C., a priest who ministers to people who are homosexual or same-sex attracted, sent a letter to the German cardinals asking them to abide by the church's teaching on sexuality. Can you talk to us more about that letter and what's been the reaction?
Yeah, sure. The executive director of Courage International, an apostolate that specifically deals and serves people who experience same-sex attraction, wrote a letter, a seminal letter, I might add, in terms of its reactions so far, to both Cardinal Marx and another prominent prelate, the Archbishop of Luxembourg, a small country between Germany, Belgium, and other parts of Europe up there, the Benelux states, they call them. And this is Cardinal Hollerich, Jean-Claude Hollerich, who is also playing an important role in the European Bishops' Conference and in the upcoming Synod on Synodality as a relator, a general relator, secretary, if you like. both cardinals have pronounced, not just Cardinal Marx, the Archbishop of Munich and Freising, that homosexuality is, according to them, no longer a sin, and the Church's teaching should adapt to recognize this and put in place a number of changes. What Father Philip Bukansky of Courage International has asked them to do in a very open and sincere letter that we published in a number of languages on CNA and CNA Deutsch in a German translation and others, is to remind them kindly and ask them to stick to the oath that they as bishops are held to, have spoken out to keep and to protect, which is of course an oath to uphold the teachings of the Church. In fact, the creed of the Church and everything that is to do with what is, after all, predicated on Holy Scripture, tradition, and the magisterium of the Church. And that includes the teaching on sexuality, as it is described in the Catechism so far. Father Bukansky makes the point that, in fact, it is quite open and clear how the Catechism teaches on this by drawing on Scripture heavily to emphasize that this is, in fact, a scripturally embedded mystery of the Church. And in particular, this heartfelt but also theologically very grounded argument is something that, in terms of the reactions so far that we're seeing, just by publishing it in German today, Tracy, is enormous. So many people have started picking it up, sharing it on social media, and it has sparked an enormous amount of debate, but also just gratitude by a number of Catholics, amongst our readers in particular, I might add, who have been waiting, apparently, for someone to simply point this out in a kind and also in a very faithful manner.
And before I let you go, AC, I know there's so much going on in Germany right now. Another thing I want to talk about is the Federation of German Catholic Youth, an organization of Catholic children's and youth associations supporting abolishing that ban on advertising abortions in Germany. What more can you tell us about that?
So this was not quite as surprising as it might seem to people, given earlier pronouncements made by this umbrella organization, the Federation or Federal Catholic Youth Organization, Tracy, namely saying that there needs to be access to abortion across all of Germany at any time, simply for women to make an informed choice. We spoke to one bishop who previously has been quite outspoken on these issues, but he was not willing to comment publicly about it. In the meantime, however, luckily another bishop has come forward who also heads up the Youth Commission, the youth work of the German Bishops' Conference, and has pointed out that this is not exactly the right view to take, although he's very polite in his criticism.
And AC, we probably have maybe 30 seconds left or so, but what else are you following right now in Germany?
Well, just before we started speaking, and thanks for the opportunity, Tracy, I spoke to one German diocese that has granted a biological female who identifies as a transsexual man the faculties to teach Catholic religion to school classes. This is a bigger issue that we're investigating at the moment, and we hope to report on in the coming hours or perhaps by tomorrow.
Okay, well, we will continue following that. AC, thank you so much for all of your great work. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And finally tonight, from Germany to Paris, where nearly 3 years ago the world was stunned when flames engulfed the iconic Notre Dame Cathedral. Now, as restoration proceeds, a virtual reality company has recreated Notre Dame's past and present. A French company which specializes in augmented reality exhibitions has created this one, which is now open at the University of Paris. The display combines source material from the Louvre with interactive computer technology. It provides a virtual visit to Notre Dame until the ongoing restoration can be completed sometime in 2024. We thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.